Demento. Christina Bonatikis.
Here.
Barbara Boss. David Cassidy.
Here.
Frederick Stone.
Here.
Thank you.
We've got some administrative matters. Unless someone has an objection, we can do the minutes from April 17th, May 1st, and May 15th altogether, unless anyone has a question specifically about any of them.
I have to abstain from 417. I was not here.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Otherwise, a motion to approve all three?
So move.
I believe I have to abstain from the 17th as well.
Okay, you guys can abstain from all of them if you want. It doesn't matter because we have enough.
Abstain from all, I'm not sure.
Okay. We have a second?
Second.
Do a voice vote, all in favor? Aye. Any abstains? Any
Aye.
opposed?
I abstain.
Councilman Ballard and Juanita Lewis will abstain. Great. Next up, we have the resolution of approval for 911 West Street, Block 34, Lot 1. It was in our packet to review packet. That's how old I am. Still think we get a packet. It was in the email that we got to review. Does anyone have any questions about the resolution?
If we have to, I'll read it because it's an important resolution because there could be litigation.
Go ahead and read the conditions at least through the stuff.
Can I bring it? Of course not. Got it? The resolution? Oh, okay.
Here it is.
Sorry.
Lady.
Well, the important thing in the resolution is the determination that we didn't have to determine which law applied. That's the major conclusion and it had to go up.
The trackpad on the bottom.
What do you do?
Scroll on the side of that silver box.
This? Oh, I see. If I can get to the conditions. I think I've looked. Where are you gonna go? All right, can you get it down?
I can do them like
No, let's. Okay, here are the conditions. First of all, the employee vehicles must be off-site. There'll be no curbside pickup. The applicant will provide an outdoor trash receptacle for people online. The applicant will instruct its security personnel to restrict any outside cues from extending beyond the front of the premises. There'll be no consumption of cannabis on site. Reference to the engineer's letter of April 26, which has to deal with improvements to parking lot, sidewalk, and curb. Compliance with the Shade Tree Commission's requirement of a payment in lieu of planting of 4 trees. And then the rest is basically boilerplate.
Did anyone have any questions about the resolution? Anyone make a motion to approve the resolution? I'll second it.
Well, you know, we did make a correction. I don't know what version you had. They're closing at 9:30, not 11.
I don't think the hours were the hours in here.
Yeah. It's in the fact.
We'll just make sure that the record reflects that.
9:30. We've
9:30.
corrected it. Shawna and I have corrected it. But
Okay. Barbara's moved that I seconded it. Go ahead and do a roll call.
One said it.
Dan Mancuso.
Yes.
Michael Ballard.
No.
Juanita Lewis.
No.
Actually, they shouldn't be even voting. The only people who voted yes should be voting on the resolution, but it's okay. No harm.
Demento.
Yes.
Christina.
Yes.
Barbara Boas.
Yes.
David Cassidy.
I don't have a vote.
You didn't vote?
Oh, I missed the first meeting.
Oh, so, yeah, so he doesn't vote.
And Frederick Stone.
Yes. Thank you. Our first public hearing tonight is 45 Northbridge Avenue, Block 4, Lot 6. The applicant is Monteverde, New Jersey, Inc. in the BR1 zone for conditional use Site plan approval and bulk C variances. The applicant is seeking conditional use approval to permit a retail cannabis sale at the premises. The applicant also seeks site plan approval or a waiver of site plan is deemed applicable by the board. The applicant also seeks bulk variances to allow any existing non-conforming conditions to remain and allow the applicant to satisfy its parking obligation by providing 11 off-street spaces in addition to 5 on-site spaces for a total of 16, where 9 are required. Welcome.
Before I begin, I have handout exhibits, if I may approach and hand those out just for ease of reference.
Sure.
Great. That's all I'll give these to you.
Yeah, we'll pass them. Now you can pass them.
Pass it up.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, I'll swear in our engineer. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Push this way.
Close to.
Good evening, everyone. Richard Wells, monitoring director on behalf of the applicant on the Berkeley. Very excited to be here this evening. Again, we're requesting approval for a change of use approval as well as a site plan. In order to allow the change of use from an existing licensed marijuana dispensary to incorporate adult use sales into their operation. This again is for the property known as 45 North Avenue. That is identified as block 4, lot 6, and Borough Red Bank tax maps. Couple of housekeeping matters. The application was deemed complete on April 27th. On May 25th, we published notice of the application in the Asbury Park Press, and we also mailed certified notices of the series, all those on the property owners list. That list and those notice materials were sent to the secretary for review.
So the 10 days ran on the publication. Have you seen it?
Yes. I do have a few exhibits that are pre-marked this evening for ease of reference. Those have been handed out to members of the board and the professionals and are also available for members of the public as well. Those exhibits are pre-marked, but we probably refer them out of order anyway. In those exhibits, we have our witnesses pre-identified as well. The information is listed in this one. And our list of requested variances is also identified as exhibits. If you'd like, I could have our 2 witnesses sworn now, or we can have them sworn instead.
Swear them in as they come.
Thank you very much. A little bit of background on this application, if I may. As I mentioned at the opening, this is an application to convert an existing medical marijuana dispensary to adult use. Now, this applicant's a little bit unique. Through a competitive process under the state's law governing medical cannabis, this applicant in December of 21 was one of 30 applicants who were chosen or awarded a permit to dispense medical cannabis to qualified medical patients. They were one of 30 out of roughly 200 applicants seeking to do this, and that award was presented to them in December of 2021, at which point they sought to perfect that award. The applicant then began the process of identifying a property, perfecting that award, which they in Red Bank. They chose and began the leasing process for 45 North Ridge Avenue as the tenant. They secured a lease with that building and they commenced the process of getting building permits and construction permits in order to operate as a medical dispensary. In zoning approval, as well as their building permits in order to commence those tenant fit-out projects. So what you see here in this plan, the site plans, the interior floor plans, things like that. Those are all approved by the building department. They are close to completion. We were hoping that they'd actually be done by this meeting. We can be operational, but construction, as you know, takes a little bit longer than anticipated. So had we been able to move through the construction process a little bit faster, we would today be an operational medical marijuana dispensary. It's therefore part of our application that we require no other site modifications to accommodate adult use sales in the operation, and our testimony will show how the existing site and existing improvements are sufficient to do so. So as part of their process to what I'll call convert to adult use, the applicant doesn't require any additional approvals from the CRC or the County Grading Commission. The applicant, once commencing operations as a medical dispensary, is simply able to seek administrative approval in order to incorporate adult use sales into the operation. We are here this evening because Red Bank has ordinance governing adult use sales, as you know, and that is why we are seeking both conditional use approval and approval of our site plan this evening. So any questions on the background before I begin testimony?
I'm a little bit confused is that the medical marijuana, it never came before us.
No, it doesn't.
My question.
Oh, it doesn't.
No.
Yeah, go ahead.
So medicinal cannabis is considered an alternative treatment center. And therefore the borough passed an ordinance, I forgot the date, pardon for that, that alternative treatment centers are considered as retail. And therefore it does not have to get a conditional use permit.
Thank you.
But now you do need the conditional
Now,
first, okay.
So that being said, again, we're here seeking two things. First, conditional use requirement, and second, site plan approval. With respect to the conditional use requirements, it's up to the board. We have submitted with our application a narrative outlining our ability to comply with each one of those 12 conditions outlined in the ordinance. I can have my client provide testimony on that, further confirm that we satisfy those conditions if you'd like.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Wells, you can pull the one from the other table over if you want.
If you want to raise your right hand, you swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth. Loud.
Just pull
And
that
hold
mic real close. Thank you. And just state your name for us, please.
Elizabeth Egan, EGAN.
And Elizabeth, everybody was up here. Yes. Can you state your position with the applicant, please?
I'm the founder and majority.
Can you tell us just a little bit about your involvement with Monteverde, why you chose to do what you do, and why we're here?
So like I said, I'm the majority owner of Monteverde. I've been in the healthcare industry for over 25 years, and I've lived in Toms River, New Jersey for over 35 years. I've seen firsthand how people can benefit from cannabis products that may not qualify for the medical cannabis, but they're not approved under a qualifying diagnosis, such as weight disorders, pain after surgery, or even just arthritis. So once New Jersey approved the cannabis, I did my research and reached out to some friends that can help me obtain a woman-owned license, which I did in 2019 for the medical dispensary, which I cannot wait to start treating those patients. But now we would like to set it for adult use purposes. So not only is it necessary from both the perspective of meeting a wider spectrum of need, and just from a business perspective, as more patients simply utilize the adult use of dispensaries over time. So really appreciate your time here today.
Thank you, Liz. So, without further ado, let's move on to the conditions. As the owner, I just wanted to hear from you how we comply here. So the ordinance in section 490-5622 has 12 conditions that we have to show we comply with in order to be deemed permitted use in this zoning district. The 12 conditions, subsections A through L, just refer to numerically for ease of reference. So conditions 1, 2, and 3 really have to do with compliance with all state and local regulations. To summarize, do you have any objection or any reason why you can't comply with your state permit, any local approvals received here today, and any local or state licenses that you may receive? Thank you. Fourth condition requires us to confirm that this is not a home occupation. Is there any residential component to this operation?
No.
Fifth condition notes that this cannot be housed in a vehicle or movable structure. This building doesn't move to your knowledge.
No.
Sixth condition is with respect to odors. So we have to mitigate it. And we'll get into this during our operation in detail later on. But for our purposes here, are the odor mitigation equipment that we plan to put in place compliant with this condition?
Yes.
are they compliant with state odor mitigation standards?
Yes,
And our testimony that Mr. Lyles will provide later, are you confident that based upon that equipment, odor will not be detected from outside?
yes,
Thank you. Seventh condition requires that mechanical equipment is required to have baffles and screening on it, both from a noise and visual perspective. And we're replacing the HVAC systems, right?
correct,
And these are all new high efficiency, low volume systems.
yes,
And as shown on our plans, we have baffles with screening around those systems, correct?
Correct.
And it's our understanding that those are state noise requirements.
yes,
Eight is that our security plan must be reviewed by the police department. Is it your understanding that our security plan has been vetted?
yes,
And as part of your medical license, you also have to have your security protocol vetted at the state level a little bit more rigorously, right?
correct.
Any objection to entertaining comments, suggestions, requests by the police department to the extent that it's on your. And going one step further here on your opening course, we plan to coordinate that with the police department so that opening operations are not a surprise to anyone. Thank you. Ninth is that we're required to show the police department has access to your security footage. Any objection to providing the police department with that access?
No,
And your security footage is also accessed at the state level as well, correct?
correct,
10th, we have to have compliant cannabis signage, meaning no depiction of cannabis leaves, no, use or heat or other sort of imagery that would, attract younger members of the business. We don't have this signage, right? It's fully compliant with both all local and state requirements. 11th, we have to submit a written report detailing our compliance with things like odor, security, nuisance mitigation. We did submit that report. Correct. That was signed and notarized as required by ordinance by Mr. Lyles, operating officer. Correct. And any objection to adopting your Mr. Lyles later on the subject. 12th and finally is that our location must be compliant with what I'll call the buffering requirements that the cannabis operation could not be located within anywhere where basically drug-free school zones, 1,000 feet from schools, churches, things like that. We consulted both the borough's cannabis map as well as their own independent research. We are not within 1,000 feet of any of those sensitive uses, correct? So any objection with confirming that we're fully compliant?
I'm fully
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Egan on compliance with condition use standards?
Anyone from the board have any questions? Does anyone from the public have any questions for Ms. Egan specifically about what she's testified to so far regarding the compliance? There's going to be plenty of opportunity for other questions and comments, but we're just going to try and break it up on the testimony as it comes. Okay. Proceed.
Thank you. I'd like to turn things over now to our Chief Operating Officer to really get into some of the details of the operation and see of the site as well. Devin, can you join me here, please? Council, can you be sworn in?
Yes. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Tell us your name and where you reside.
Miles, starting Boulder, Colorado.
Devin, you gotta pull that mic real close. You're a soft talker, so get right in there so we can hear you.
How's that?
That's
A
excellent.
lot better. You want to repeat where you live?
Yeah, my name is Devin Miles and I reside in Boulder, Colorado.
Boulder, Colorado?
Yes, I am a co-owner and chief operating officer for the
This is not your first rodeo, safe to say, correct? So can you tell the board a little bit about your experience in cannabis operations?
Sure, I'm nearly 20-year veteran in the cannabis industry, having started my career in the early 2000s in California, where they had medical marijuana legalized as of 1996. And then moved to Colorado, which moved from and CEO. Team.
as chief operating officer, Liz kind of directs the policy, the strategy and things like that, but your job is really to ensure that the site functions as best as it can possibly function as a dispensary and that all industry standards and compliance items are followed, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. I'd like to just go over the operation from a couple standpoints. First and easiest, I think, from the customer's perspective. And maybe to help us along with that narrative, we can consult what a pre-market test H5. Which is a copy of what we submitted with our app. It's not a new exhibit, but it's cheap, it's free from our technical plans here. And that's your plan is to help us review things from. But then, we talk about getting into the facility. A customer comes in and they are entering into the service lobby, correct?
That's good.
And it's at that point where your first point of ID check takes place, right?
That's correct. One of the check in there's several are.
And that ID check is not really done by just eyeballing an ID, it's done by a licensed person trained to do that, and it's actually scanned, correct?
That's good.
So once the person is ID'd and confirmed that they are of legal age to enter the dispensary, they then enter into the sales floor. And there are two ways that they can go from there, right? One being pre-orders and the other being sort of a browsing or general talking with the sales associate.
Right.
So let's talk about the pre-orders then. Let's say someone has pre-ordered a product at your dispensary. What happens next? Do they have a dedicated point of sale kiosk?
Yeah, we can have, we can designate a number of the register depending on the volume of pre-orders to be express checkout. So essentially, if someone has already made product selections online, all they need to do is come in and show their ID. As we just articulated through the purchase canvas of their valid ID. And then they'd be directed to go to a point of sale system. Someone who's sort of.
And once they do that, they're assigned to the pre-order kiosk, they pick up their order, their ID is actually checked in at the kiosk, right?
That's right.
They're paying for the order, they take their product out, and they're on their way, right?
That's right.
Roughly how long just from entry to exit do those pre-orders take, that process?
It should be on average around 5 minutes.
And let's talk about it from the other perspective. So someone wants to come in and browse, maybe they want to talk to a sales associate, past the service lobby, got their ID checked. When they walk into the sales floor, is this like a liquor store where all the products are just displayed on the shelf for browsing?
All the products are behind the counter. Our employees standing with them, customers are not allowed. Product is taken out each morning with stuff there. So if someone makes their selections, the employee takes it from the back stock area.
So no products are just on display for someone to grab and go, as they say. So same process, they talk to a sales associate, they make their selection, product is pulled back, ID is checked again before purchase, and they're on their way, right?
Correct.
What about the length of time for that average transaction?
So that average over a 12-month period should be about 2 months.
So after purchase, regardless of whether they're pre-order or walk-in customers, there's no on-site consumption permitted, right? There's nowhere available either inside or outside for customers to consume on your product.
Correct.
And on-site consumption is just not permitted in general at your establishment, right?
No, absolutely not.
That's actually a separate license, it's a separate approval, which you don't have, and we take that very seriously.
Very seriously, not interested in
With respect to consumption off your site, obviously you can't control anything off of your site, but based upon your experience in the industry, is it more common for consumers to just get in their car and drive away, or do people actually consume the product outside?
It's just so prohibited in every market that I've been in. It's just from a licensing perspective.
Mr. Lyles, pull that mic a little closer or speak up, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you?
Repeat what you just said, because I didn't hear it.
It's just so extremely prohibitive to not consume on site. Any market that I've operated in, it's one of the biggest no-nos, and it's absolutely a licensee's interest to make sure that it does not happen.
And in order to make sure that that consumption doesn't happen on your property, you have signage inside that says no consumption permitted, correct?
Correct.
Your staff is also trained, if anybody asks, they say, no, you're not allowed to consume.
Correct.
And no encouragement to consume, you know, how you go down the block or 5 feet off the parking lot and you can consume there, none of those instructions.
Absolutely not.
Great. I want to talk about some of the back of house operations now from an employee's perspective. So all your employees are vetted, they have to comply with CRC regulations, and they're also trained in security protocols, but your specific operating procedures, correct?
That's correct.
What do you do just generally to train your employees? You don't have to go into detail for this scenario.
We have extensive standard operating procedures that have already been submitted to the CRC at the state level. They've been approved, including extensive security procedures for checking on customers, inventory management, how the inventory flows into and out of the dispensary.
So for deliveries, in order to get products into your store, those are accompanied by things like Sprinter vans that you commonly see from Amazon, correct?
Correct.
They're not accompanied in 18-wheelers or anything much larger than that, that just right? So Sprinter van comes on site roughly how often?
Well, for recreational, this could be every other day.
Every other day, sure. And those deliveries ideally are off-peak hours or off operational hours, correct?
Yes.
What is the average length of time for those deliveries from the time the Sprinter van pulls up to the time they leave?
We would hope that wouldn't take much.
And with respect to security of that delivery, the distributor or the delivery driver also has certain security protocols that they're required to follow, correct?
That's correct.
With respect to trash and waste, this just generates your normal office waste, right? There's no hazardous material, nothing special that you have to dispose of here.
That's correct.
And that's handled, you don't even need a dumpster for that. So we don't have a dumpster on site. Trash is handled in your standard trash receptacles, correct?
Yes.
Handled by, I believe it's a private hauler.
Yes.
With respect to cannabis waste specifically, there's going to be no usable cannabis waste in the trash, right?
That's correct.
If for some reason you have a recall, there's damaged product, somebody spills a soda on it, whatever. You don't just chuck that product in the trash or flush it down the toilet, right? There's actual reporting requirements that you need to follow.
That's correct.
And more often than not, is the distributor or the delivery company the one who takes that product back, correct?
That's correct.
And both you and that delivery person complete the required reporting, registered or not registered, but report the product as disposed of or unused, and they dispose of it off-site.
That's correct. There's a facility.
Great, so just to reiterate, under no circumstances will there be any cannabis products thrown in the trash.
That's correct.
On the subject of security in general, are both the interior and exterior of this facility covered by camera coverage?
There.
That coverage is monitored 24/7 by a third-party security company?
The video, it's all being recorded. It's not being monitored, being watched by the 24/7, right?
But you have a third-party security company that does handle those cameras, right?
Yes.
In compliance with state requirements, they've vetted the security system, said it complies.
Yes.
As well as the reporting requirements. I believe it's 30 days that the footage has to be stored.
That's correct.
With respect to just moving around the facility security wise, are your employees on a basically kind of key card type of system?
Well, they're given access according to their role, so not all employees have access to all areas of the dispensary. Most notably vaults. Certain key employees have access to the system. Otherwise, it may be.
So with respect to those key card systems, you're able to control who accesses where in the building. And when they do, you can see who accessed what room and when, right?
That's correct, just with regard to development, correct.
And I want to hit the vault as well. So product storage is in the vault. What does a vault mean? Can you describe that security generally to the board?
Well, generally, it has to be requirements at the state level, so because we're on, have been vetted, and this all has already been approved by the state, to meet their requirements, which are certain DEA requirements. And I think that more into the actual physical characteristics of the wall.
Safe to say a little bit more robust than 2 layers of drywall.
So it's reinforced block with steel rebar and wire mesh at every third level block.
And those, like you said, that meets DEA requirements at the federal level.
Yes.
With respect to just some general aspects of the operation, borough ordinance permits us to be open from 8 AM to 10 PM, 7 days a week. Is it your intent to be open for those hours first or in general, or how do you intend to use those hours?
It's their intention to be open at those hours initially. That doesn't necessarily stay open for those hours. From a business perspective, we'll be analyzing when exactly our sales occur. If being open those hours isn't justified by the sales volume we have data, we may choose to.
And when you're open, let's say you're operating at peak capacity, maximum volume, based upon your industry experience operating a number of facilities, what is our anticipated peak customer demand for per hour for a facility of this size?
47 per hour.
And what percentage of those,
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Was it 47 or 47?
Sorry, 47.
what percentage of those 47 per hour, again, during your peak hour, do you anticipate to be pre-orders versus walk-in?
We anticipate that number to eventually reach 50%.
So 50% of your customers then spend roughly 5 minutes on site pre-orders. The other 50% spend about 10 minutes on site, walking in, kind of browsing with the sales associate, right?
Yes, on average.
And our floor plan displays 10 point of sale systems.
That's correct.
So with those 10 point of sale systems, what would be, if all 10 were staffed, what would be the ability to process customers using all of those 10 systems?
In terms of,
Peak customers per hour, what could that process?
we just said 47 per hour.
Correct, that was our actual anticipated demand, but in terms of what the facilities could process, if all 10 of these were staffed and all 10 were operational, what would that mean for the ability to process? Would that be over 47?
Yeah, it would be. That's double
And with our, I'm going to move now to, it's A4, which is our copy of our site plan. But with that anticipated volume, we have existing spaces on site. It's your intent to reuse those spaces, correct?
Yeah.
Those 5 spaces be sufficient to accommodate the mix of both pre-order and walk-in customers? Operational perspective might need a little bit more than what's on site, right?
Yes.
And as part of that, and recognizing that need for extra spaces, have you or has Monteverde obtained the ability to use 11 off-site spaces?
We have been in process, and we're still in process of securing space.
We currently have. And we also are in the process of perfecting an agreement to lease those spaces exclusively.
That's correct.
It's your understanding that we have an LOI submitted to the borough. It's sitting, given administrative circumstances, we'll say, taken a little bit longer than it's expected to get that LOI signed.
Yes,
But you intend to use those 11 parking passes for your employees at first, to make sure that parking both on-site and anywhere off-site is, first and foremost accessible by customers, correct?
that's good.
And I want to talk also about queuing. Now, assuming that you have, 47 peak customers per hour, even though your point of sale systems can accommodate more than that, there may be a circumstance where, your first couple weeks of opening or so might experience some large demand, you're working out the kinks. What are we doing to mitigate queuing outside? Can you talk about those processes?
So we have plans for a virtual queuing system, so folks can walk up to the outside if we're not able to allow them to capacity being reached. They can scan a QR code and we'll immediately put them into a virtual way. So then they're asked to leave and wait somewhere off-site or go run errands, do something else. And then when we're able to accommodate them, basically get them into
And with respect to your pre-order, so on top of that, what we call virtual waiting room or that text system, your pre-orders also have the ability to be scheduled within a certain window, correct?
Yes, if we do that.
And you can also limit the number of people who schedule a certain pre-order time, so you have control over volume from the length of the window, whether it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, to the number of people who can actually schedule a pickup order in that window. Okay?
That's correct.
And the goal of utilizing that system is to be able to adjust, to meet demand, and ultimately to reduce, if not completely eliminate queuing along the outside, correct?
That's correct.
In the event that those systems have some kinks to be worked out, or maybe the first day or two even takes a little bit to work them out, you're not going to accommodate queuing along the bridge avenue, correct?
That's correct.
If at all, you want to direct people along Brower or back into their cars, like you said, with this text wait system, right?
Yes.
We're going to move on to odor mitigation here. So again, we're looking at the outside of the building, and you heard Liz's testimony that odor will be separable from the outside. We're just selling packaged products here, right? There's no open flower, no processing going on here, all packaged.
That's correct. It's required by state regulation. Prepackaged and sealed.
So notwithstanding the fact that it's already sealed, it's stored within your vault, you do still have odor mitigation systems in place, right?
That's correct.
Can you summarize what those odor mitigation systems look like?
Yeah, so one is called bipolar ionization. It's installed within the rooftop air conditioning unit. And basically it emits ions that grab onto the volatile organic compounds, neutralizing them. Additionally, we have inline carbon filtration boxes that have multiple layers of carbon filtration for the return air. So as the air is sucked back into the unit, it passes through the carbon filter before being conditioned. Distributed back into the environment.
And is it safe to say that that kind of two-layer odor mitigation is something that's also commonly used in a cultivation facility?
It is, yeah. It's overkill for this situation.
Thank you. Any objections to confirming that with those systems in place, odor will not be present from outside the building?
That's correct.
And if for some reason there is an issue in the off chance something breaks down, you have the ability to mitigate that and just adjust that system as necessary, supplement it to do whatever it takes to make sure there's no odor.
Yeah, we can supplement with freestanding carbon filter scrubbers.
But like I said, it's temporary just in case the system breaks down.
That's correct.
With respect to site lighting, again, site lighting is existing, but we're replacing the existing site lighting as shown on the sheet. These are all downward facing lights. You're not having any sort of, blinking, flashing neon, no waving lights, anything crazy like that, right? It's the goal to provide just enough lighting for security and pedestrian safety purposes, with the goal of not spilling over into adjacent properties, right?
That's right.
And is it your understanding that this plan by replacing existing lighting with town enables that to happen?
I'm not sure if that directly to download, not help.
Thank you. The lights around the parking, after off operating hours, you don't want the building and the whole lot to be completely lit up after you guys close for business, but you do need some security lighting, right? So what is the plan for just overnight security lighting after hours?
The plan, pending approval is to have them on a motion sensor. We have built in the system versus so it could be to meet the security requirement and create a light for our neighbors.
And on the subject of light pollution, any objection to working with both the borough and your neighbors if there are questions or issues with light pollution, maybe redirecting a light or two just to make sure that you're a good neighbor from that standpoint.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Last I want to talk about signage is we're just replacing signage in kind, correct?
That's correct.
And we have a copy of our exterior elevations that we pre-marked as 2006. We confirmed with the board that these signs, including the awning and the existing freestanding sign, that was the same signage that was used by the current copy, right?
That is correct.
Same size, location, style of sign, everything like that. You're not changing it, just a separate copy.
That's correct.
And none of these signs are proposed to be blinking, neon, changeable copy, anything of that nature, right?
No,
Are they internally illuminated or do they have a small spotlight on them from the outside?
a small spotlight from the outside.
Thank you. Couple notes on the review letter we received also. So the board engineer asked for a couple of plan revisions, which was just correcting mentions, amending plan notes on here just to make sure that our plan is up to it. Any objection with making those plan revisions and plan notes? We also submitted a written response to the board engineer's letter today. But you know, we're going to go through the responses just for the record, that submission. So first, are you aware of any drainage issues on the site? And with respect to landscaping, there's no landscaping proposed now, but there were some comments about tree shade tree requirements, additional shrubbery requirements, things of that nature. With respect to the shade tree requirement, any objection to posting a $1,500 payment to the tree trust fund? And with respect to landscaping, we have kind of a small site here. If you look back on A4, not too much we can do, but we're still proposing some foundation things, right? So we'll provide a landscape bed and foundation shrubbery along both the Howard Place and Bridge Avenue frontages of the building.
That's correct.
Even though we can't exactly satisfy the requirement for, I believe it's 10 trees and 21 shrubs, is the landscaping going to the best of your ability meet the intent of that requirement?
Yes, it is.
There's also a shed or two present on site that's not identified on our plans, and that relates to another question that was brought up regarding the NJDEP monitoring on the site. So Devin, is it your understanding those sheds are associated with the NJDEP's monitoring of the site?
There it is.
So those sheds are meant to be temporary, correct?
That's what I understand.
And you're the tenant, unfortunately not the property owner of this site.
That's correct.
And if I may, a brief monologue, it's our understanding that the NJDP mitigation efforts here are actually they're taken over by the state. Again, the applicant is not the property owner, so there's not really much they can do to work with the DEP. But the mitigation and monitoring efforts that are going along here, similar to most of the dry cleaning sites that you see, have been taken over by the state. So as the operator here, it doesn't really affect us, but to the extent possible, we'll comply and work with the DEP if they need access to anything to continue monitoring efforts, but it's our understanding that monitoring has been going on since roughly 2011 and it's still taking place again under a publicly funded or state funded DEP monitoring program. That's basically all we have to offer. Correct. That's right. The actual program started in 2011 with monitoring is more recent.
That's right.
Thank you. With respect to ADA compliance, so our plan notes 1 ADA space, 3 standard size spaces, and 1 compact space. Even though we're just restriping the parking lot, ADA requirements state that we have to become compliant even though we're just restriping. Our 9-foot space is non-compliant with a van space. So in order to meet the ADA requirements, we want to provide 1 ADA van accessible space. And to do that, we would have to widen this 9-foot space to 11 feet. Is that correct? Consistent. And then an 11-foot ADA space combined with a 5-foot access side would meet ADA requirements. But in order to do that, we would have to reduce 2 of our 9-foot spaces to 8-foot spaces. Are you willing to do that and restrike those 2 additional spaces so that we can make sure we can meet the requirements?
Yes.
And would it be your preference to have those spaces reduced to 8-foot compact spaces versus just eliminating space?
Yes.
And it's your understanding that with that van space, the 5-foot access aisle would be consistent and compliant with your ADA requirements as not there.
That's my opinion.
And last but certainly not least, I do want to address parking. What we're doing here is it's our position initially that we don't require a parking variance, but we're trying to go above and beyond and make sure we address all potential scenarios. Under the borough's ordinance, it's section 490-146B1. If you are changing your use from a non-residential to another non-residential, basically commercial to commercial uses, not expanding the building footprint, and no other variances or relief are required, you don't have to seek variance relief. Requirements here, we are considering unspecified retail use, which equates to, based upon our square footage, a parking demand of 9 total parking spaces. We have 5 on site. That creates a deficiency of 4. That same deficiency was the one that was used for our medical application. It was used to basically change the use from the dry cleaner to a medical cannabis dispensary. It was the same square footage, same parking deficiency of 4 spaces, and therefore variance relief wasn't required. We're effectively doing the same thing here. We're unspecified retail, moving to another unspecified retail, no change in building footage, no change in parking demand, and no variances required. Again, all existing conditions that were receiving building permits as part of the medical operation. So initially, it is our position that variance relief is not required. But again, we recognize that operationally probably going to need a little bit more, which is why we went beyond to get those 11 additional spaces. The ordinance does permit satisfaction of your parking requirement for a number of off-site options. One of those being through securing off-site parking under the exclusive control of the applicant or by leasing parking spaces from the parking utility. As we stated, these are borough-owned parking spaces, so they can't be under our exclusive ownership. And we are in the process of finalizing that lease with the parking utility. We believe we're close to getting that done. We haven't received any objections so far. So it's our position here that, first, we don't require variance relief. Even if we did, we're able to satisfy the the parking requirement by utilizing these off-site spaces. It's our position here that we meet the intent of the ordinance that way. We're trying not just to meet it, we're trying to exceed it, which is what we really want to do to be good neighbors here. So if you'll notice in the application, we kind of left it up to the board. If the board thinks variance relief is appropriate here, we have requested it and we noticed for it. Alternatively, if the board thinks variance relief is not appropriate, we would satisfy it via off-site parking. We've also requested it and noticed for that option as well. So we appreciate your consideration on that issue when the time comes. Devin, I sort of took over for a second, but any objections to incorporating that? To,
Yeah, it's fine.
No further questions, you have anything you want to? Any questions for Mr. Lyles before we open things up?
I have a couple of questions. It's a very good presentation, thank you. I would like to know, because maybe I missed it, number of employees,
So number of employees on shift for recreational would be 15 to 17.
15 to 17 at one time.
That's max,
That's
not all day.
a small building. And how many clients would you allow in the building at a time then?
Same.
Tight squeeze in there. It's a small building.
Yeah, it turned out bigger than I thought. Walls have gone. Yeah, it's 34 total.
Wow. Okay. I see that as probably too many, but I'm not. No, doesn't give you much room. Okay, there was some other things. Oh, that, I guess those two were the most important.
To piggyback on the number of employees, how many of that 15 to 17 would be security personnel? And are you planning to have full-time security personnel physically in the building?
All of our staff are considered security personnel.
You don't have any separate security?
That's correct.
And are any of your employees armed? Okay, thank you.
Couple questions. You're approved for medicinal purposes. So even if this change of use is denied, you'll proceed with opening as a medicinal dispensary, correct?
Right.
My big question here is, and you testified that you have substantial experience in opening operations like this, is that you have single-family residential next door at 43 North Bridge. Have you ever opened a dispensary next to a single-family home? Do you have any way of measuring what the impacts of this dispensary will be towards a single-family residential home?
Measure.
Yeah, right, so. What were do you know the hours of the dry cleaner previous, the business that was there previously? You don't. I'll be honest, honestly, I 7 I'll be candid at 10 o'clock. Besides the fact that I'm concerned about those impacts on that home next door, that's what separates this plan from others that have come before this body to me. I have concerns about the hours of operation, and it'd be remiss if I didn't just express them. It's, you know, going till 10 o'clock at night could be pretty late, especially with people next door. Would you consider reducing at the outset as a condition of approval your hours of operation?
I have a hard time with that just because that's what the ordinance permits.
I understand, but I have the right to ask if they consider it as part of an approval.
I think the testimony was that 10 PM would not be the end all be all the time.
Right.
That it would be scaled back based upon demand. If the demand's not there, there's no reason to be.
If demanded,
If the borough changes operating hours, then we have to comply with it.
I understand. So you're saying, oh, you would not.
Don't want.
The answer is no. I got it. I appreciate the answers and the questions. Thank you. And you did make a very nice presentation, by the way, so you should come before us more often.
I'll try.
Go ahead, Juanita. Go ahead.
I just have a quick question, because you seem to have the timing down for the purchases. How many products will you have available for sale?
Awesome.
That's tough to say, but you know, there could be well over 100 different products in which it's different strains of flower.
average turnaround time for a person to make a purchase is 10 minutes?
Like I said, over an annual average, yes, a really well machine should be able to do 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Even if a customer doesn't purchase in advance online, can they see all of your products online in advance before visiting the store?
Yes, they can.
Can they do that without having an account on your app or website?
Yes.
Okay.
It's in our interest to encourage, and that's why I said testing. Hope to get that number up.
I know you have, Mr. Wells, you mentioned a response to the engineer's letter. Do you want to do that, or Ed, do you have questions first?
I just had a couple. Could you just recite the occupancy calculation? I think it was at 34 of the building.
Yes.
And I don't recall seeing or hearing anything specific to somebody else's mic on.
No, it's all you.
If you could use Juanita's mic, maybe.
How about that?
Oh, still there.
Let's stay back a little bit. Could you speak to the medicinal, albeit not open yet? Your intent is to conduct both operations once the license is converted?
Yes.
And could you give just a brief summary of how those two things interact? If there's any differences between the two that would present any challenges for the operation of both at the same time?
Challenge, and we're actually both, motivated by our own mission, but also required by the state to continue, not only continue to serve medical patients, but also to give them preferential treatment. So we may have dedicated point of sale systems, and actually as a condition of merging with the state, we'll have to satisfy their requirements for how we will take care of patients in light of the increased volume of recreation. So, spaces for them in the parking lot behind the building, give them dedicated hours that they can shop, to getting dedicated, letting them skip the line essentially to the sales station before the recreational customer.
But there would be times when perhaps you'd have intermixing of retail customers versus medicinal customers building at the same time.
That's true.
The other, I guess, comment I'll make is, Mr. Chairman, just kind of addressing the parking question. There is a section in the ordinance that was properly cited. My belief and understanding is that section where you're talking about changing from commercial to commercial, so long as there aren't variances or other waivers required, that was really geared towards administrative approval. Because in some cases, that was basically in deference to, if that's the only thing that would trigger somebody coming from a like use to a like use to have to come to the board. There was a provision made that was felt was an appropriate number of spaces, that as long as you were within there, you wouldn't have to come to the board. So I think we're in the gray zone a little bit with respect to that. Insofar as the ATC use didn't require any board approvals. So that was really just like a local zoning approval. So there's some differences there. The one question that kind of came up in conversation with Mr. Wells and I was any variance relief that may or may not have been required as part of the ATC. The only thing really is they have pre-existing conditions that are within, variance condition level. They did add the ADA ramp across the front of the building. There's question on whether that was elevated enough to be considered part of the building or whether that should be considered part of the sidewalk. Again, slightly gray zone, not overly impactful to the application. It's really a board decision, and I'm sure there'll be perhaps a little more conversation about the parking. I think that the testimony that you've heard here tonight is that, giving the ability of employees to park at the offsite location makes a lot of sense. That's typically what we strive for. They'll probably talk about some of the on-street parking that's available, obviously. all of the applications that we've heard thus far. We want to be mindful of impacts to neighborhoods and residential sections. Clearly, this area was always intended to be the sector of town where the cannabis seemed to be best oriented. So I think that's from the approval level, that was the conversation at council. So I think those are a couple pieces of information that are important. But I just wanted to weigh in on that, the parking demand question. I think the other elements, are you gonna have engineering or architect testimony or?
You know, I didn't want to overcomplicate because we weren't changing the building, so.
So do you want me to wait or do you want me to kind of go through maybe more of the point by point stuff that maybe I just want to get out?
Go through the point by point on the letter.
Well, Mr. Wells basically took my letter and provided a response dated today. I believe that to be relatively,
I think.
Use Juanita's. You know what? Why don't you unplug it and switch it, see what happens? Can you do that?
You're an engineer.
Yeah, you're an engineer.
that's hardwired, right?
No.
Yes. You don't actually have a plug.
Oh.
How is it? You're not even
probably
working on it.
Is it?
Let's try
No,
that.
that's not it.
Know that.
But
Okay. But he doesn't have,
he doesn't even have a cable on it.
we wanted to see it flow.
That one's easy enough and zip tied.
You guys have this.
Oh, boy, here comes the voice.
Sit there.
Won't do anything, I promise. It's Angela. But she never really talks, so you never know what. No, they always prepare.
It's only like the last.
Boy Scout.
It's a mess.
So not fun.
Turned on.
They were like, nobody uses that, right?
I can lean over and just speak into this from here.
We need another XLR cable to extend it.
That's okay.
Does,
Oh my God.
I thought they have one in the closet.
You know what?
Shauna, do you have another XLR cable in the closet?
I have no clue what that is.
Did it take everyone to come? It may be.
I'll officially reiterate my request for improved
Yeah.
Second.
improved microphones in this council room. All right. So I said that the counsel for the applicant had prepared a response that we received earlier today. Generally as a point by point, so I'll kind of touch on the important pieces there. So the first one was the conversation. You picking me up?
Yep.
Okay. The first one was the conversation I just had regarding the parking in the offsite, the demand as part of the section 146 requirements. We talked about ADA, the ADA parking space and their compliance with the amendments to make that width appropriate for the standards. The existing utilities will be reused. There's no proposal to change those. Again, the parking probably will be talked about a little more, but that's testimony has been provided therein about the offsite. We'll probably want to talk about methods of securing that approval if the board deems that's necessary. I think the applicant has indicated good faith efforts to deal with the parking utility in terms of trying to lock down those approvals. I think we'll kind of defer that to a later conversation here tonight. I had mentioned that the sidewalk along Bridge Avenue has some uplifting around some trees and that the corner ADA ramp is not fully compliant. The applicant had agreed that they would replace the sections of sidewalk as appropriate as required and also the ADA ramp on the corner. I believe that's your testimony, Mr. Wells.
Which maybe not be.
Let's hold that for conversation.
Just, I think that concern was just because we put in the current ADA in the building at the request of the Borough School. I think that was
It's been approved by the building department as it is.
so they're talking about
This is the street
Oh,
this section.
at the corner of Bridge and Morford, and Broward.
Flag.
sure, yes.
Okay, that is the yes, sorry, I'm clear on.
I thought that's what you said. So we talked about off-site parking. We talked about the ADA clearance, the modification of the ADA van accessible width to be compliant with ADA standards. There were a couple of, so the existing parking lot previously had a few design waiver type challenges. The width of the area was not quite up to snuff, so there's a couple dimensional requirements. The applicant basically has asserted that, you know, it operated as a facility there for so long that some of those negligible changes. I don't necessarily disagree. I think there are a few waivers, but the testimony is that the site operated satisfactorily all these years as another facility for help me out, dry cleaner. Thank you. I was drawing a blank. So those were a number of design waivers that theoretically would be required as a new application before us tonight. Again, we're in that gray zone of this is sort of a change, so it's not really a full site plan where they're doing full levels of improvement. We had noted that there was a fence installed on the, I assume that would be the southerly side adjacent to the neighboring home. I believe that's 6 foot and went to sort of the front of the building. Maybe we'll get a little more testimony on that if that's the extent. Again, this project is a little bit unique in that it's not typical that we see an application that comes in where construction is already ongoing. So basically they're doing a tenant fit out, which is their right by permit through the building department and zoning approval previously. So they're sort of working on two parallel tracks with tenant fit out for the medical ATC use while also coming here before this board for the retail conversion component. I have no objection to the commentary about the LSRP. That's typical. I think we've heard that testimony from several applications. It's typically a long-term monitoring process, certainly with dry cleaning facilities. They are known for groundwater contamination. So that's typically, it can be a 10 to 15-year process of monitoring, observing. Usually the groundwater background levels reduce over a period of time without really any interaction. So that'll just be a continuation of the LSRP standards that is monitored and followed either by a designated LSRP or sometimes it does go into the direct oversight of the DEP. The applicant agreed to do the sidewalk replacements as needed. The other question I had made was Brower Street is a little bit beat up. There are cases where we have site plan reviews which have improvements going on. Again, this is a little bit unique in that they're not doing much. They're really trying to occupy without doing much. I had suggested perhaps they consider doing paving improvements along the frontage, which historically we would ask for on a site plan. Again, this is a bit of a gray area. I know the applicant had indicated that that wasn't necessarily in their plan for that. So the board would have to kind of weigh in on whether they think that's appropriate for the scope and level of the application before us tonight. Excuse me. The other testimony, I think, is some of the nuisance mitigation. We heard a lot of testimony on that. I think that's appropriate and applicable based on all the testimony that we've heard at other places. This retail component is all sealed, it's all packaged. The stigma of the original couple applications that came in for grow facilities are the ones that really had the issue with the odor and really polluting the neighborhood with skunk smell. Every application that I've heard is consistent. The state wants this to be highly packaged. No one's touching it outside of the end user offsite. So it's in-house. None of this is to be. You shouldn't smell it. I appreciate the testimony that they have backup systems in place for air scrubbing and air handlers, ionization, all that seems appropriate. The applicant even said perhaps overkill, but we appreciate overkill. We don't want to smell it, nor do any of the neighborhood want to smell it. So I think that's appropriate. In terms of the trucks, the Sprinter van, that is exactly what I've heard, time and time again. There will be no 18-wheelers. It's just not indicated for this type of use. So I've seen that in many cases where that's the testimony. I think that's reasonable based on my understanding of these operations. Again, the hours of operation were really driven by the ordinance, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Subject to any and all consideration the applicant is willing to commit to. I think the operational narratives were generally well thought out and well written for the application. Testimony was that there's no drainage improvements, as there's really no significant site improvements. The testimony was also that they're not aware of any particular drainage issues on the site. Landscaping and lighting, I don't really have any objection. It's a pretty small site, so I don't think they can really go crazy greening this up. I think foundation plantings would dress it up nicely. They just don't really have much room to do anything beyond that. The commitment was to provide a payment into the shade tree fund. That's appropriate. I'm okay with the security lighting being motion activated for the parking lot once they leave. There's really no reason to have it lit up other than, for security purposes. I think that's appropriate. I believe that the testimony regarding the signs was also appropriate. They are replacing 3 existing signs with 3 proposed signs that'll be generally same size, shape, location, and compliant with the ordinance.
Ed, where's the third sign? I see the sign, the north
There's
facing.
one on Brower, there's one freestanding small sign on the ground, and then there's a canopy sign on the front entrance door.
Okay.
So I think that's largely the commentary that I have.
Anyone else from the board have any questions?
Yeah, I one more. You spoke of security as the fact that you are not having any specific security guards, but you're having all of your employees be security people. I understand the concept. Were you required, and did you present the police department with that plan? And was it approved?
Yes.
They approved that? Okay.
However, I reached out to Chief McConnell the other day, asked him specifically, and he provided an email
I
response.
mean,
He has reviewed it and has no problem with the security plan.
okay, because every other one has had a truly specific,
Yeah.
very specific security plan. And this does not seem quite as specific. Thank you.
They were his decision. So I was gonna ask the same question.
Can I go back to the virtual queuing thing you testified about? Curious, because you're saying that to mitigate crowds in a location like this, you implement a virtual queuing system. What's the efficacy of these systems at your other sites? That people actually utilize them, or do you find that people still wind up partially using those systems and also still gathering outside waiting? I'm just curious what the impact and the efficacy of that system has been at your other sites.
I'm gonna use the other sites.
Oh, you've never used it? Okay, so your other sites, do people queue outside? Do you not have the same kind of volume of customers? Like, so there's not a need for a virtual queuing system?
Volume just hasn't been.
No one said it was a requirement, but why was it not a necessity elsewhere?
Because queuing was allowed outside. It's our understanding that one wanted to do because we are adjacent to residential. It's also.
Given
Platform.
I have a question regarding your signage. So the current work that you're doing right now at the site, we'll be installing the signs. And for medicinal business, and those same signs will be used for the recreational, correct?
Correct, yes.
And the fence, your plans show that is it a solid fence or is it what type of fence is it?
Put on board, I believe, but yeah, put on board, but you can't see through.
Board on board wooden fence.
Can see through it?
Yeah.
Oh, cannot, okay. Is it possible for you to extend the fence? Where the building begins on Bridge?
It does come up to the front edge of the building.
If you can keep it in the same location instead of, because your plans show that it's set back. It goes up midway to the building. Is it possible to keep the existing where?
Yeah, and I think the discrepancy is these plans were more likely than not drafted before that fence was put in.
Okay,
So the current fence, the board on the board fence that goes up the building, that's gonna remain.
okay. And
It was
that's,
approved, yes.
that's 6 foot.
Correct.
And that all the interior work that's being done and won't be touched again for the new use of the recreational.
That's correct.
Are you going to have any ability, I'm sure the answer is no, because it's just my craziness, to monitor your clients and parking in the Granville Apartments? I see they have a huge parking lot, which is not used very much in the daytime, but they do have assigned parking there. Are you going to put any signage or anything that the apartment parking lot is not a private, that is a private parking lot?
We don't have plans to do so.
I mean, I'm looking at this and all I see is empty parking spaces and thinking, oh, there's a place to park. Yeah,
Certainly.
Okay.
As well.
all right. Thank you.
Anyone from the public have any questions? Okay, so let me explain how we're gonna do this. We're gonna break this up into 2 parts where we do questions first. Questions to the applicant regarding anything they've testified about. If you have comments about the application, that will come later. So please try and focus what you're gonna talk about up front to questions. So who wants to come up first? Suzanne, come on up. You know the drill.
Yes, it is.
Raise your right hand, swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Suzanne Scolari, 25 Cedar Street.
Did you say
Okay. One thing you didn't mention was about, armored car or how the cash would be moved in and out. You talked about the delivery of the product, but what about the cash?
Yes, we contracted with a service that specializes in delivery and change.
And what's the, time, is it gonna be the typical 8 to 10 hour or nothing wrong?
That would be more during typical hours.
You mentioned about your security cameras and your, in-depth, the HVAC system. What happens when the power goes out? Do you have a backup generator or something?
We have the ability and the ability to add a generator. Plans. Yeah, that battery is required for the security systems. As we stated, our tech irrigation. We need to be an issue as all the public is in see.
And I did live in Warford Place for about 2.5 years. 6 years ago, There are instances when there's a lot of parking issues, when there's a funeral across the street, in the front of Granville Towers. And to Ms. Bowe's point, the parking spots are, one's given to a resident and then their spouse or whoever usually parks on the street. When there are, unfortunately, big funerals, there's been a lot of monitoring by Granville and sometimes to keep that, transient kind of, hey, there's a spot and I really want to get into the funeral, I'm just gonna sit anywhere. Are you aware of those instances when that area does become very, high impact trafficy and there really is no parking spots for like afternoon service and evening service?
No, I'm not specific to that.
At what frequency do you anticipate the cash pickups?
So it's very much dependent on volume and amount of cash, but with recreational. frequency. So, safes, there's a big shift. in cash. Safe is inside the vault. So that's our moment cash, which is in safe. Service. Which can be as free.
Thank you.
Do you plan to take credit cards?
Debit cards. What's called a true debit system, where it's the actual transaction amount.
And where will the Sprinter van be parked within that parking area or on the street? And then the deliveries where is the delivery happening? Or pickups for the money truck?
Either along Broward Place near the back door, or if a spot is open in the parking lot. Yeah, if the handicap spot is open. They show up, they have to first check in and present their credentials so that they're authorized to be making delivery.
So the remaining spots, I'm sorry, I missed that in the testimony, that's gonna be converted to compact car spaces. So how will the vans? Oh, 2 of them will be. Thank you. All right, thank you.
Other questions? Martin?
Raise your right hand, swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do. Linda Hill, 64 McLaren Street. Thank you very much. I just have 2 questions. First is, would you require your employees working during the day to park in those permitted spots that you are acquiring?
Yes, we would.
You will,
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, thank you. And my second question is, and I don't mean this to come off from left field, but as far as your prospective employees, I'm sure that there are many standards that you have to go through for the state, but do you have any requirement that your employees be citizens as opposed to, say, permanent residents, green card holders?
Yeah, we're committed to hiring as many as we can within the community.
But what about their citizenship status?
If somebody's permitted to work, they're permitted to work. I don't know, I don't understand what someone's status has to do, other than the fact, as I'm about to be reminded, that some people's, based on their status, cannot purchase marijuana. If someone's legally allowed to work, I think that's, the standard we need to look at.
Yeah, unfortunately, the US Customs and Immigration Service doesn't agree with you. And permanent residents, regarding having a green card, are not allowed to be employed by or to purchase.
Right, well, that's what I'm saying, then those people aren't permitted, so I'm talking about people permitted to work.
But I'm asking whether that has been a consideration. Okay,
So the question is specifically to people not, while permitted to work in the United States, not permitted to work in your industry. Have you taken that into account? Based on their status?
It's all federal labor laws.
please look into that. Thank you.
Next person with a question?
Whatever is right. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Phil Milletto, 43 North Bridge Avenue. The parking, so you can have like 15 to 17.
If you could just speak into the mic.
And you're gonna have between 15 and 17 employees.
Correct.
So if you have the spots, they're municipal spots, right?
Correct.
Can anybody park there? Like they always have been?
As of now they can, but as we testify, we're looking to secure them for our exclusive use.
But you don't have them yet.
Not yet.
Because Beer Vino, that's packed every night at those spots.
We have permits up there, but they're not exclusive.
So you really don't have the spots there, the parking spots. Because if Beer Vino's using them, everybody uses those spots. I think she said when you have John Day, have the green spot, not the Greek spot, takes up all the Bridge Avenue on weekends. Have the Italian ice place, there is no parking. So I don't understand where
Our observation has been that those spaces are mostly empty. They are employees of the company. They will have access to those spots.
If your employees are parking, yeah, so where are the customers parking? There's nothing.
There's behind the building in the street.
Very little, because between Granville and Beer Vino for lunches, there's not many spots, there's really no spots.
I guess I would have to disagree with their spots. I've walked the streets and seen that there are spots.
I've been there 45 years and it seems to be one. One of them was saying that the deliveries, do they come after hours, you said?
No, they don't.
They come during hours.
Yeah.
I do have a problem with the hours too, from 8 to 10. Had a lot of, taken away the quality of life for a lot of so especially on weekends. I have a big problem with that. And also, you said you have a lot of walk-in customers. And it gets full, where are they gonna stand?
On Saturday, they can't stay on site. To register with the patrol.
Because there's a lot of foot traffic up and down Broward Place too, between the two, the bus stops on one place to go to have the bus stop right in front of you.
Mr. Milletto, I appreciate that you're asking questions, but try not to slip into commentary after it. Stick to the questions. Yeah, talking about that there's no parking and well, I understand that that's the way you feel about the situation, but when the comment section is, you can come up and say whatever you want. Right now, just stick to the questions, which you're starting with every time, and I appreciate, but just end with a question and not then with an observation of the neighborhood. You can do that during your comment period.
All right, that was it. Can I ask him, engineer a question?
Absolutely.
You just made the statement that that area was always looked at for cannabis. Why did you say that?
My reference was that was the,
Maybe it's you, Ed.
Clearly, it's me.
Go to the doctor.
Well, just talk
Oh,
loud.
my goodness.
Oh,
Just talk- It's you.
It's me.
Yeah, we know.
Radio signal.
Just talk loud.
Thank you.
right back.
I was not offering really a professional opinion on that, other than those were the areas designated by council when they chose to adopt an ordinance. The northwestern section of town was the primary area that was considered in consultation with the school zones and things of that nature that there's been a lot of talk about. So I was not offering whether I felt it was a good location or not. I'm saying those are the areas that were originally envisioned when council adopted the original ordinance that allowed cannabis, that opted into the cannabis program.
So that was the council that designated that area.
That area was found to be outside of those key buffer zones, the 1,000 foot from schools.
There's other areas that are outside of it too. I'm just wondering why that area.
That was kind of a blanket statement that maybe was a little too cavalier on my part, but what I'm saying is that that was an area that was always envisioned that was outside of those. If you start drawing the buffer lines and the maps and things, that was an area that was not free and clear, but the most clear of the buffering restrictions.
More so than Newman Springs Road?
That was in there.
Not more so, no, not more so, but as much as. From the original ordinance, they would be seen very much in the same light.
I was just wondering why just one area is being targeted when there's other areas. That's my question.
That's the applicants are picking, I guess, perhaps available locations or spaces that are open to rent or areas that they think would be more feasible for their business than others, of those that are deemed more likely, like this area or Newman Springs Road.
Is Newman Springs also?
Yes, it is.
It is.
Yep.
So Phil, I can hopefully provide a little more clarity. The original ordinance specified 1,000 feet from schools. So this Bridge Street area would have been that. And also the amendment that the council adopted but were rejected by the planning board would have also included Bridge Street and this particular area. But this is known as a commercial district. It's actually a mixed use district. So that's why these were picked in the original and in the amendment to be where retail cannabis could be sold because it is a commercial district, as you know. So that's basically. Right.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I'm wondering why that just one area was targeted.
Well, again, as the chairman said, these are the applicants who feel these are the.
That's the only option they have.
Well,
No,
it's not really.
no,
There's several areas in town, as Councilman Ballard said. I mean, this is not the only street in town that this use is conditionally permitted. It just so happens that 2 retailers chose this street. They could have chosen many others, but didn't. But they certainly weren't pushed in any one direction by the town beyond where the town thought it was good to or bad to put it.
You did, it's just kind of ruins this area with the traffic. Because I think you all know how traffic that area is. It's very heavy traffic and it's backed up every day. And it's a bad spot when you put everything in one spot.
Thank you. Somebody else with a question?
Guys, I have a question for maybe Mr. Lexstein. What is the role of the Cannabis Control Board with this application? Does this have to still then go before?
I don't know.
That's been approved. You don't know the answer to that one. Don't.
Maybe.
I'm actually,
Okay, then why don't you answer it?
Jump in there, Ross. I was trying.
good old Shauna.
So the Cannabis Control Board formed under the borough's ordinance?
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be, they get approval from this board and then get approval from the CRC and have to present before the Cannabis Review Board for the borough and then council, recommendation from council, so.
Perfect answer.
Anyone else from the board or the public have any questions for the applicant?
I just have
Go ahead, Christina.
Just had a quick question. Were the hours that you're talking about, I believe 8 to 10, were those the hours that you spoke about when you got approval for the medical?
The medical ordinance dictates, 8 to 8.
So this is an extension.
Just want to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I love your smile.
Hi, Nancy Blackwood, 34 Chestnut Street. I just have a question and maybe a comment. So the question is, to the applicant, are you aware that there's a parking garage about a block and a half away? And as you were thinking about virtual queues, this is where I make a suggestion, you might want to take a look at that parking garage, maybe customers can utilize that. That's all.
Are there any other questions? Okay, we're gonna take a 10-minute break.
I was in the neighborhood today. Yeah. Oh, it was the point for lunch. I'm reading a bunch of them. So I live my favorite breaks and 500 feet.